adoption? Seeing no objections, agenda is adopted. And if there are no objections to adopting the minutes of the regular council meeting held May 11th, 2021, I'll move adoption. Seeing none, motion is carried. Do we have a public comment on agenda items? Ms. Best, do we have anybody lined up for public comment?
Through the mayor, I don't have any signed up right now, so I'm just going to call once, call thrice, and twice, and then thrice. And no, we do not have any public comment on the agenda items.
Super. Okay, we'll move on to the mayor's report. We have a little bit on island health for everybody's knowledge. Island Health, the Chamber of Commerce, and myself and Councillor Chalmers have been working to help facilitate a whole community vaccine for seasonal workers, and that should be coming in early June. So I want a big thank you to Mike Benusik of Island Health for those efforts. I really appreciate that. I'm sure our community does too. And a reminder to everybody that to register for age 12 to 17 vaccines. You have to register on Island Health for that, I believe, unless Island Health has a whole community approach coming, but I haven't heard yet. And what else? Well, we have a volunteer recognition award right there, Zoom style, for Vera Webb. So congratulations, Vera Webb. She's been, everybody's clapping in Zoom land. And Vera Webb has been volunteering for over 2 decades, and especially with Pacific Rim Hospice. And she was the president there for many, many years. She was a founding member of the West Coast Winter Music Society and is treasurer. And that's just been a wonderful success over the years. So many people are just so thankful for that. And she's also been on the board of the Tofino Hospital Foundation as treasurer. So what a wonderful, wonderful legacy, Vera. And she's been a constant presence, steady leadership in hospice throughout her tenure. And she's also been on our volunteer recognition committee, which is probably why she's escaped being nominated for so many years. So finally she is, and she can't be on Zoom today. So I believe Tim is here witnessing this. So thank you very, very much, Vera. Thank you, Tim. It's wonderful, wonderful legacy there. And we also have another couple folks that we have to celebrate. Nicole Cutler, 15 years of service with the District of Tofino. Started in 2006 as a full-time office assistant and survived. And she is now a full-time accounting assistant since 2007 as an accounting clerk, and her current role as accounting clerk in financial services since 2013. Amazing work, Nicole. And John Mazeros, also 15 years of service. John joined the district in 2006 as a seasonal bylaw officer, and he joined Public Works in 2011. And he's been great. I love seeing John around, and thanks for all your work, you too, Nicole and John. Much appreciated. That's my mayor's report. Big round of applause for everybody. They keep our town going so many ways. Delegations. I believe 6.1, we have a delegation from Cathy Peters, and Cathy's an educator with the Be Amazing campaign regarding human sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, and child sex trafficking in BC and how to stop it. So welcome, Cathy.
Through the mayor, welcome, Ms. Peters. I've just promoted you to panelist, and I'm just going to start our timer here for 10 minutes, and I will give you a 30-second warning if you're getting close to time. So take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody in your worship. Human sex trafficking and sexual exploitation for the purpose of prostitution is the fastest growing crime in the world and is very much here in BC. So what is human trafficking? It's the recruiting, transporting, transferring, receiving, holding, concealing, harboring, or exercising control over a person for the purpose of exploiting them. The key word is exploitation. This is modern day slavery. Here are some stats. 13 years old is the average age of recruitment into the sex industry, much younger for Indigenous girls. In the Lower Mainland, the target age now is 10, 11, and 12-year-old girls. COVID has made this much worse. Traffickers are very organized and sophisticated. 54% in the sex industry are Indigenous. They are severely overrepresented in the sex industry. This is the worst case of systemic racism in the country. I shared this with the BC Indigenous Chiefs and Federal Minister of Justice, David Lametti, a couple of months ago. At the very least, Indigenous women and girls want forensic nurses and rape kits. 82% involved in prostitution had childhood sexual abuse and incest, which is preparation for prostitution later on. 72% live with complex PTSD. This is the worst form of trauma a human being can experience. 95% in prostitution want to leave. It is not a choice, it is not a job, and it is not work. 86% have housing needs, 82% need drug rehabilitation because drugs and the sex industry go together hand in hand. 84%, I just got this stat, of prostituted persons are pimped out or trafficked. So by far the majority have a pimp and organized crimes involved. I've been raising awareness about sexual exploitation and specifically child sexual exploitation and trafficking to every city council, MLA, MP, and police agency in BC since the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act became federal law in 2014. I raised awareness about this law so the police would enforce it, so the public would understand it and be able to report it. The law has three parts. Number one, targets the demand by targeting the buyer of sex, the predator, trafficker, pimp, facilitator, John. Buyer of sex are criminalized. Number two, recognizes the seller of sex as a victim, usually female, and is granted, what's the term? Victim, well, they're not prosecuted. I was going to say not criminalized, but they're not prosecuted. Prosecution immunity. Number three, exit strategies are put in place to assist the victim out of the sex trade. So the law focuses on the source of harm, which is the buyers of sex, and the profiteers. The clear statement from Parliament was that girls and women in Canada are not for sale. They are full human beings with dignity and human rights. Vancouver and Toronto are global sex tourism hotspots. Canada is known as a child sex tourism destination, and the public do not know that. I got that from the Trafficking in Persons report from the US State Department. And here's the other top book that's just come out on this. My website has excellent information as well as, and there we go, beamazingcampaign.org. And in your package, I did send you a sheet on how to stop child sex trafficking. That's actually quite helpful. The global sex trade is growing very fast. It is targeting our children because children is where the money is, and it's fueled by the internet where most of the luring now is taking place. And boy, are the traffickers ever doing it quickly. Contributing factors to a rapidly growing sex industry are globalization, unregulated technology, no surprise, limited law enforcement, and very little prevention education. So that's the bit I do. Canada has a new national human trafficking hotline number. There's the number with help and resources anywhere in Canada. And provincially, we have OC Tip and we have Victim Link. And here's the Victim Link poster. I don't see these posters around anywhere, but there they are. That's provincially. Pornography is fueling the sex industry and creating the market for commercially paid sex. Men and boys are the buyers of sex and are the key to end exploitation. Our men and boys need to understand there's a sacred part of the woman they have no right to. I got that line from Vancouver Police Department. So what can you do in Tofino? I keep it really simple. Here's your strategy. You want to reduce the demand by targeting complicit businesses, and you want to diminish the supply by education and public awareness. So you want to train your business licensing managers what to look for when granting business licenses. This is a really effective way to give the message to the sex industry it's not welcome in your community. For example, like number one is unregistered massage and body rub parlors, nail spas, holistic health centers, day spas, modeling agencies, tattoo parlors, escort services, cheap bars and hotels, men's clubs, Airbnb, VRBO, casinos, strip clubs, organized crime clubhouses, truck stops, homeless camps and tent cities. Work camps can be typical covers for sex trafficking and exploitation. If you have crime clubhouses, you can use land use bylaws to remove them. Regarding hotels and motels, Ontario, in an effort to curb trafficking, is now mandating registration of every guest who is physically in the room. The sex industry is targeting our youth, children, and the vulnerable in every BC community, and schools are the recruiting grounds for gangs and sex trafficking. A critical deterrent are the school liaison officer programs in schools because officers prevent crime and protect the vulnerable. Any anti-police narrative will harm our communities. They are the only people trained to enforce the law. BC is getting further and further behind every province in Canada in both enforcing the law and raising awareness. Therefore, BC and the Lower Mainland is the best place in Canada to buy and sell women and children for sex. Public awareness in BC is completely lacking. That is why I sent information packages to all 190 city councils in BC to warn you all of this rapidly growing crime. I do have 3 asks. Number 1, could I present to any stakeholders in your community? Number 2, could you please alert the Premier and Solicitor General that this crime is a priority in BC and there needs to be funding for provincial law enforcement and a provincial awareness campaign. We also need an interagency human sex trafficking task force. It's what they have for drugs and gangs. It's what they have in Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia. And could you write me a letter of support? Just so you know, I've been working on this for over 40 years. So just so you have that background. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Peters. Very enlightening. I really appreciate those statistics and your hard work and background in this. Would any councillors like to ask Ms. Peters questions or have some comments? Councillor Anderson and then Councillor Steer, please.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. My question is, are you aware if this has ever been presented as a resolution at UBCM? Has there been anything related to it? I did visit, I don't know if it was your organization, but a booth at UBCM when we had live attendance at UBCM. And yeah, so anyways, has that been presented there?
Yes, it has. There was a UBCM, 2 resolutions actually in 2015. One was on human trafficking. That was brought forward by the Northern Communities Local Government Association. And they also had a one on rape culture. So they had 2 resolutions. The one on human trafficking, I think, kind of fizzled. The one on rape culture actually went to FCM. We need another resolution. And I've got a current petition right now with the federal government. I have an MP sponsoring me on that. So I do need help with writing a resolution because it really is children the sex industry is going after. And because Tofino is a world-class tourism destination, you've got human trafficking happening in your community.
Councillor Steer, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Peters. I appreciate the presentation again, and Councillor Anderson asked the question that basically what it is that we can do. The other question that I have is many of us are involved at the Parent Advisory Committee level at our local high school and at our public school here in Tofino. The high school is in Ucluelet. You had mentioned briefly some of the strategies, or is this something that you, with parent advisory committees or with the administration or the school districts, is there a presentation possibility, or is there an action that could be driven through that avenue as well?
Well, because Ucluelet and Tofino is our favorite place on the planet, I do this all for free, just so you know. And again, I'm a teacher, so I just did a presentation to a whole bunch of schools last week. So I do schools, I do PACs. I'll present anywhere to anybody because right now, BC is the best place to buy and sell women and children for sex in the whole country. The sex buyers and traffickers are pouring into BC. You watch out when that border opens and all the Americans come up. You have, I think, 1.7 million visitors per year. I think it's sort of the same kind of numbers as Venice. You have a huge number of people that pile in. You need to protect your young girls. And so, yes, definitely to get into the schools, present to PACs, to parents, you really need to know about this. You have so many tourists coming in. The same problem at Whistler, same problem in Vancouver. So absolutely, I'm available to present.
Any other questions and comments for Ms. Peters? Yes, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ms. Peters. I really appreciate it because just at this point in time, we are in conversation with a few other people in regards to sexual assault. And so I think I don't have anything concrete, but it's certainly part of our conversation right now in our community. So I think what you've spoken to us today is really important. And I just wanted to ask you to repeat, you said you had 3 asks and I missed the first one. If you could just repeat that so I could write it down and think further on how to go forward. Thank you.
I could ask you,
Okay,
to
so
repeat
could
all 3 would be great.
Oh.
I got the first 2, but not the last one.
Sure, it's to present any state. Number 2, could you please alert the Premier? I just did meet with Mike Farnworth last week, but alert the Premier and Solicitor General, boy, letters really help, that this crime is a priority in BC, and ask for considerable funding for the provincial law enforcement and a provincial awareness campaign. We also need an interagency human sex trafficking task force. I mean, Alberta's got one, and we have that for drugs and gangs. And I also need a letter of support. But just so you know, we used to have an action plan. It expired in 2016. This provincial government's not doing anything on this issue, and that's scary.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Peters. We don't usually write letters on the fly, but I think we'll bring this back to council for further discussion. And we are having discussions as well on, as Councillor Thick has pointed out, we've been having meetings about raising awareness and education on sexual violence, and sexual assault in our community. So I would very much like to bring this forward for discussion and possible action. Any other comments on this one? Thanks very much again, Ms. Peters. We have another delegation. We have 6.2. We have Bob Brash, Executive Director, the Truck Loggers Association, regarding the value of forestry to Tofino citizens. Do we have Mr. Brash?
Hello. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for the chance to talk to you today. I suppose the best way is I'll share my screen and hopefully my technical competence doesn't show too badly here. Are we good?
I'm viewing it. Yes, we are.
Good. Thank you very much. So again, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. Just a quick reminder about what the Truck Loggers Association is all about. Been around for 78 years now. We got just under 500 members across BC, all the way from folks that do the whole gamut of logging to some that are subcontractors to suppliers to service industry affecting the industry to First Nation members, and we've got 20 community members also. So pretty diverse membership. We work with the provincial government on policies and regulations affecting the forest sector, We're obviously concerned about the prosperity of the industry on both the short and long term. And we've been a pretty strong, I think, and leading voice for the people that work in the forests of BC for a long time now, and hope to continue doing that. And we're also quite heavily involved in forest education and scholarships. We give out scholarships to high schools and trade crafts and stuff like that. So we're pretty busy on that end of things too. Who do we work with? We work obviously with the provincial government, major licensees, labor, the value-added sector, BC First Nations Forestry Council, BC Safety Council, and WorkSafe BC, of course. Safety is a big part of our organization's work. And there's lots of other forest-related associations which we connect with on a very regular basis. Now, maybe to the core of reason to sort of chat to you folks today, some of the challenges that our organization sees moving forward. We continue to be a little concerned about the overall investment climate in British Columbia. And by that, the money that is flowing back into British Columbia with new capital, new projects, transition to value added, the list can go on and on. Obviously, right now, if you've been to the hardware store, you'll notice the price of lumber has gone up just a little bit lately. And hopefully there'll be some relaxation of that a little bit in the future. But it's envisioned that the markets will stay pretty strong for the foreseeable future. That's good for people working in the forest, good profits, steady work. So that's all good news. The concern is the money that comes back into the province to invest in these new facilities. All indications are that remains pretty limited. We're concerned about the long-term certainty of the working forest land base. We're concerned about the overall sort of high costs of running forestry business in British Columbia and the complexity, the regulatory environment that we deal with. All those regulations are great. Nobody's got an argument with them. It's just we've got to find ways to streamline them. And from a cost competitiveness, we're not competitive with our global competitors. So that has to be improved upon. We're concerned about consistent information about the forestry sector. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. And lastly, we have to somehow all work together on what a collective vision is for this forest sector moving forward. This slide obviously talks about the working forest and old growth. There's a few headlines in the newspapers these days and on the media about events that are going on. And there's a flood of data and opinions, and I could give you a flood of data and I could give you a flood of opinions, but not today, unless there's a question about it, of course. The concern is that the lack of, frankly, constructive dialogue that's happening out there right now. There's quite polarized debates. And you have to ask yourself, who's talking to who? Because at the end of the day, we do have to work together. And we don't see a lot of that happening these days. From our perspective, we figure the loggers of this province have been pretty good at adapting to change over the decades. And we know that there's more change that's going to be demanded moving ahead. And from our perspective, harvesting is not always a yes or no proposition. In highly sensitive areas with multiple sort of values in that one chunk of area, there are options to sort of look at innovative type harvesting systems. And frankly, we think we can do those. The economic contributions of the industry remain significant. Probably every truck that goes by represents $15,000 to $25,000 of GDP to the province. So we support change. Obviously, we have some biases about what those changes should be, but I think a lot of those would be common elements that you folks would understand. We figure there should be more diversity in the tenure system. There should be more diversity in the flow of logs and lumber. There should be opportunities for investment to make the transition that government calls for value added. All those things we can agree upon. The trick is how we're going to get together to agree upon the details of making those things happen. So the main purpose is that we believe there may be some opportunity for collaboration and cooperation. Obviously, we have lots of discussions with our community members, and we can provide them with firsthand knowledge about the forestry sector, contributions to payrolls, number of employees. We can definitely assist in public education and information. And we can definitely sort of try to work to find common elements in advocacy efforts with the federal and provincial governments when policy changes are being considered. For instance, the Premier has made it very clear that he's coming out with something called the intentions document. And this intentions document is we believe, to do with diversifying BC's tenure system. But we don't know much beyond that. And obviously, when that document comes out, we would like the opportunity to work with you and other communities to find where there can be some common elements, because the overwhelming majority of our membership is community-based, people that have lived in their communities for years and years and decades. And obviously, we'd like to work with the communities to find these sort of common elements and try to get a bit around the polarized debates that are happening. So that's hopefully going to be an opportunity that the government provides us in the near future, but we have to wait and see a bit. I won't spend much time on this, but we've got lots of avenues to get the word out. We have magazines 4 times a year, e-newsletters. We're all over the social media platforms, and we have sort of a convention every January. Well, not last January, that got canceled for the first time in 77 years. I think even during World War II, they kept it going. So that was a change for obvious reasons. So that was the core of my presentation. And if there's any questions, I would be more than willing to sort of do my best to answer the questions. And I'm just trying to stop the share now, and there we go. So.
Thank you, Mr. Brash. I'll open it up to council for questions. Any questions for Mr. Brash on his presentation, logging in BC? Councillor Steer, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brash, for your presentation today, and appreciate the time taken to come to the community. And I'm sure you appreciate that Tofino has a long history in the discussions around conservation and the productivity of a working forest in British Columbia, and specifically into our area. And I'm curious as to your thoughts on the, as you know, with the province's old growth strategic review that was completed in March of last year and then presented in September to the public. And within there was 14 recommendations. And I think part of, and I think for many of us, the thought was that this may be the ability for the long-term future of the forest industry in general, from an ecological perspective, and also from a long-term tenure for an understanding that what the industry has moving forward. And it was broadly supported by many. There were at least 800 stakeholders involved, and there was a broad consensus within industry, I believe, communities and the unions that they represent. I'm just curious as to the Truck Loggers Association's viewpoint. Are they supportive of those recommendations, and how much engagement in that process did your organization have?
Well, as far as engagement goes, to be honest, we talked to the authors of the report, but I think it was only on one occasion. So fairly limited input into the document, or we were provided fairly limited input into it. And the second sort of caveat is that it's a very complex report. I mean, I've been in this business for a long time, and I'm reading through it, and there's a lot of recommendations there, and there's a lot of opportunity for interpretation of what they're actually getting at. And I think the trick is right now, and I read some of the sort of statements made by various proponents of whatever side of the debate. I know this is being simplistic, but I boil it down to what's people's interpretation of what the short-term critical areas are for old growth protection. And all of us may have a slightly different sort of idea of what those critical habitats are. And somehow that's got to be pounded to the ground so we all know what we're actually talking about. And I frankly, I remain a little sort of confused as to what the actual recommendation means at the end of the day. So there's more work to be done. Do we support the protection of sort of critical, and that's where we're going to have to get on the same page, and there might be some difficulties there. Do we support the protection of critical type areas? Sure. The devil's in the details.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Mr. Brash? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Brash. Okay, we have, concludes our delegations. We're moving on to correspondence. And we have 7.1. Mara and Robert Love wrote a letter regarding electric bikes on the multi-use path and the beach. And I believe I did speak to our manager of public spaces, and I believe Ms. Fremont is on here. So I thought rather than go into a panel discussion on this, we'd let our manager talk about what she's been working on for quite a while now. So go ahead, Ms. Fremont.
Thank you. So through the chair, a significant body of work has been done to develop policy, including stakeholder and community outreach in the middle to late part of last year. It has been a challenge how quickly, even over the past year, the e-mobility device, so including not just e-bikes, but e-skateboards and that type of thing has changed, and how quickly it's been adopted, and how quickly that's happening relevant to provincial policy. And as you know, both the multi-use path and the beach, which are sort of prime bike riding jurisdictions in Tofino, are both impacted by different ministries with different policies around e-devices. But that said, staff will be bringing draft policy directions to council in the coming weeks. So I think this is something council will hear more about very soon.
Thank you very much. Will that satisfy for now for talking about this letter? Anybody have any specific questions, or can we wait till we have a proper report from our manager? Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just one comment. I'd be very interested to know what it would mean if Tofino aligned their regulations around using the bike path with Parks Canada regulations. I believe Parks Canada is going to have some limitations on what type of e-bikes and speed limits and so on. So it would be great if we could sort of get to a point where there's a consistent regulation on the West Coast. That's my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. And go ahead.
Through the chair, to Councillor Anderson's comment, staff have been working with park staff to try and make sure that those policies are aligned. Obviously, the user is not going to see a huge difference if they're biking from Tofino to Long Beach. Certainly, there will be some signage at the entrance, but they're not likely to. It would be obviously ideal if those regulations were consistent. So thank you. I take your point.
Great. I think this is a very complex issue, and so I look forward to seeing the report come to council. Thanks for all your hard work on this. 7.2, we have a District of Mackenzie from the District of Mackenzie regarding a letter of support for 988 crisis line, and this has come up several times, and I believe we've already, as a council, written a letter and had a response. So we'll move on. 7.3, Ministry of Municipal Affairs regarding the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program, also known as CAREP. And I'm just going to make a quick comment on this because it has come up in private letters to myself as the mayor, and just point out that this was a sort of a grant fund from the province. Just to FYI, Tofino received less than $3,000 from this program over the years Tofino's been involved, and for that, it required 1 to 2 months of staff time, including senior staff time. So seeing this program for us, for a small municipality, like many small municipalities around the province, seeing this program be ending and restructured and funds going to other things like housing is for us a net gain. And we do understand that the larger cities and municipalities or larger towns may not have that same experience. Any comments on that one, Council? Thank the province for doing that and moving forward. We have 7.4. We have a letter from James Rogers from Care Network. Any specific comments on that one? Councillor Thick.
Yeah, are we going to talk about this in more detail at another time, or is this time to ask questions? I'm just not sure.
I personally, I see our manager of protective services here. I believe this is something that perhaps we can talk about through our protective services department going forward. Would you like to say anything at all, Chief Baker?
Yeah, thank you. I have had the opportunity to go through the proposal, and I've asked some questions of the CARE Network and Mr. Rogers just to try and get some clarity. I don't know if it's easier if perhaps council has particular questions that they want to ask, and then that way I can cover or do my best to cover anything that council has on their mind at the moment. I will say that I do think that there is some value in having some sort of third-party service. I think there is a need for additional animal control services that perhaps we're not currently in the position to be able to offer. There definitely is some more questions that need to be answered to get to the bottom of what might make the most sense for the District of Tofino and its visitors and residents. But perhaps if there is some specific questions that council has, I can try and answer those right now.
Okay, not realizing these are going to be fairly brief for Chief Baker. I'll open it up to council. And I see our CAO, Mr. McPherson, has unmuted, so perhaps I will give him the first go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly, if council has any questions of Chief Baker that we can either answer now or hope to get answers for, we can do that. I wonder if, given the size of the ask, this to me is something that would be good for us to refer to our budget process. And I know it's only May, but we're, as staff, getting underway, getting the 2022 budget ready for presentation to council in what is really just a few months from now. So if we can get if there are questions we can answer and we can work on, and Chief Baker can work with the CARE Network in getting something comprehensive together for part of the budget deliberations coming up this fall.
Great, thank you, Mr. McPherson. I concur. Now I will open up for Councillor, I believe Councillor Steer had his hand up, then Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Thick, noting the time and comments already made.
Yeah, Mr. McPherson basically commented exactly what I was going to say.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, just reading the letter, it seems like the district has some need for this. I have no way of assessing how much of a need we have for it. So I suppose when it comes back for discussion, that would be my questions is how much are we currently doing in the way of animal control and care, and do we need help, or do we need help in specific areas? All those kind of questions, sort of, how much of a service do we want to provide, I guess is a question we have to ask ourselves too. Okay, that's all.
Councillor Thick?
Yeah, thank you. And as our CAO said, this is a fairly significant ask. I think it's at 30,000 times 4 years. That's 120. Am I right in my calculation for the ask? So I had three main questions. One is I went on the website, but I couldn't see if there was a board of directors, and I thought that would be an important thing to know as a nonprofit society. Secondly, I was looking at what are a bigger financial picture would be important for me. I see from the website that there are daycare services provided, and they're at a fair, I would say a fair cost. Perhaps, I don't know. It's more than I've paid before. But so what's the breakdown, for example, in fundraising, which I see there's quite a strong there's quite a strong leaning towards that on the website. And then what is the what is the revenue derived from the daycare services, or what might be the expected financials from that. And I guess if we're talking about the West Coast, which is what CARE stands for, coastal something, what are the contributions expected or asked for from Ucluelet or other First Nations? So I think we would want to know a little bit more about that. And also the fourth thing would be, what is the breakdown between perhaps visitor animals and those that are residents? I did do some investigating around town, and yeah, those are just some of the questions that have come up in my mind. So I would like them answered maybe in preparation for our next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I concur. I would like to see our services really driven by District of Tofino staff and our own statistics. Moving on, we have 7.5 Ministry of Municipal Affairs regarding May regional calls follow-up. Stemming from that, just a note today that the province did announce a new restart plan starting tonight. And that is a 4-step, I believe. And starting immediately, there's going to be a reopening of, or starting tonight at midnight, I believe there's a reopening of restaurants and travel, Vancouver Island wide, and some other things. So I encourage people to review the BC province's website on those restrictions that are being lifted and going forward. Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I just was wondering if we needed a motion to refer that last item to the budget process.
That's a excellent question.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Anderson. That would be ideal.
Okay, I will. I'll move then that item 7.4 of correspondence be referred to the budget process.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any further discussion? All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion's carried. Thank you for that, Councillor Anderson. It's a team effort. Moving on, we have presentations and reports. And we have 8.1, a change of signing authority, and we have a report from our financial services.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I don't have a presentation for you this afternoon. This report is very administrative in nature, but I am available for any questions if they come up.
Thank you very much. I think this is pretty straightforward. If anybody has any questions, now's the time, or we can simply have somebody move the motion. Councillor Steer.
I'll move the motion that the staff be authorized to add Mayor Dan Law and Nikki Best, Manager of Corporate Services, as signing authorities for the District of Tofino.
Seconded by Councillor Challenger. Any further comments? All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. We have 8.2, zoning bylaw amendment, shipping containers. And this has come back to council. And we have a report from Mr. Rogers, our Manager of Community Sustainability. Mr. Rogers, over to you.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'll just share my screen and get started here. Great, I'm assuming you can all see the black bear. Today I'll be presenting on a zoning amendment for shipping containers. I think we're all familiar with this, but a really brief background is on June 23rd of last year, the bylaw received first reading, and then it was brought back to council earlier this year, March 23rd, for second reading. At that time, council identified some concerns about stacking, landscape screening, and venting. Staff have gone back to the bylaw and made some amendments and present the report today. A brief overview of those are that just to ensure council that any containers would require building permits as they are identified as structures in the definitions. In terms of zoning, the use would be for storage. They would have to adhere to setbacks, height, and lot coverage of the zones that they're being placed in. There'll be provisions for stacking, for screening, and ventilation in the zoning bylaw. The development permit process includes provisions for screening and location of containers in the downtown core. So they're not permitted in front yards, and if they are permitted, they have to be screened properly and still need to meet the zone. The Tofino, I've contacted the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department, had a meeting with the training officer, and he is in the process of developing, could develop a training practice for shipping containers. If this zoning amendment moves forward, we would be updating the building permit application and associated fact sheet. And then also be, if it comes into force, would be educating, improving safety, the existing containers through education by the training officer, the fire chief, the building inspector, the business license inspector, and protective services staff. So the recommendation is to read it as amended and to waive the public hearing. And that brings me to the end of this very short presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. If you can, oh, perfect. Okay, so we're going to open this up for discussion from council. We have Councillor McMaster, Councillor Steer, and Councillor Challenger in that order. Go ahead, Councillor McMaster.
I have a question and a comment. First of all, and you mentioned a shipping container shall not exceed 4.5 meters in height. I wondered why that height was chosen. A standard container is 2.6 meters in height, and a tall container, shipping container, is 2.9 meters in height. So I wondered why we were going to 4.5 when they're not actually built greater than 2.9, and are we opening up a floodgate in that sense? And my comment is, I'm really concerned that, as I've mentioned before, that some of these containers will be used for illegal accommodation, short-term rentals. I would like to know what the bylaws will be if someone is found using them for accommodation. I would certainly like to see that they be forced to remove the container. So if you can respond to the height question first, Mr. Rogers.
Definitely. I'd have to go back, Councillor Costa, I have to go back to the research we did, I guess it's going on 2 years ago now. So I don't have an answer for you today. We based this on other communities, and I'm not sure at this point where the 4.5 meters came from, but I'm happy to go back and take a look at that for you.
Yeah, I suspect the 4.5 came from people stacking containers. And, the size of containers hasn't changed in 50 years if we're talking about actual shipping containers. If we're talking about quasi-shipping containers that are manufactured for a specific purpose, then you might be up to 4.5.
Thank you so much. I don't have an answer for the second question or statement. It's the use that we're proposing would be for storage only. And so if there was other activities happening within the storage containers, we were doing the protective services staff to help address that issue.
Yeah, I'd like to see that protective services are involved at the start so that we're not playing catch up down the road. Thank you.
Councillor Steer, I believe you have a question, then Councillor Challenger.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Aaron. I did have, the height was one of the questions. And the second one was in the outreach portion of it, you talk about identify and improve the safety of existing containers. Will there be a requirement if this does go through as, specifically, I'm guessing around the ventilation, will there be a requirement to make those changes of those owners, or if necessary, or will they be exempt from that?
This is an active conversation within the department. Currently, we are, as we are going through our business license inspections and our fire inspections, we're having that conversation with owners about providing venting in existing containers. I think that is something that in my conversations with the fire chief and the training officer, they would like to continue to do so. For the containers that aren't based, that aren't commercially based or industrially based, so where there's not a business license attached to it, that's a little bit more of an open question. Yeah, and so it basically, I think that the staff seems keen to address this. The containers themselves that exist now aren't permitted in the sense that we're not going to be grandfathering anything in. You can't grandfather in a use that wasn't actually permitted in the first place. And so I do know for the commercial and the industrial ones, we definitely will be looking at that. It's still an open question about the residential, the ones that are on residential properties.
Councillor Challenger.
Thank you. I wasn't familiar with the term landscape screening, and I just wondered if you could define what that means for me.
Generally, what we require for landscape screening is something to be covered by, in Tofino, a lot of times it's a cedar bush, but with plantings or vegetation to sort of mute the impacts of other structures. So something, as raw as a metal box, it's sometimes covered up, or vegetation is placed in front of it to try to pretty it up a little bit.
Thank you.
Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I appreciate that this has been going on since June 2020, but having only been on council for the last 2 months, I've done a bit more thinking about this over the last little while. One of my main concerns, and I'm not understanding completely whether this is covered off in what has been written so far. My main concern is, as Councillor McMaster said, that there would be absolutely 100% no use of these shipping containers for accommodation, either short-term or long-term. I said it before publicly, and I still believe that the right place for them is in industrial way, but I want to be 100% assured that we can, that there would be no accommodation. And I know that with the pressures that this town faces, I feel we need to cross every T and dot every I in terms of preventing that use from happening at this point in time. That, I don't know what others feel about that, but that's what I feel is a very important part of the conversation. And I would feel much more comfortable in allowing the recommendation to stand if that use was prohibited. So I don't know if you can speak to that, or any other council members would want to speak to that, but that's my comment, my question. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thick. I can speak to use a little bit. The way that the zoning bylaw works is that if a use is not permitted, then it's not permitted. So the permitted use for these containers would be for storage, unless they were to go through a building permit process. But again, they don't have to meet all the other various regulations about how many dwellings one had on a site and what have you. So because storage is the only permitted use for these, if anything other than that use would occur, then we would be looking to protective services to right that wrong. It's exactly the same as if somebody took a garden shed and turned it into a accommodation. It's no different. The shipping containers are defined as structures in the exact same way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess.
Do you have another question here, Councillor Thick?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that doesn't give me much confidence. I just, I just think that if we don't say no, it cannot be a use. Somebody and some people, or it'll be found a way to be made a use. So that's my comment. I would like to see it in there.
Do you have any other comments before I make a comment? Councillor Chalmers or Councillor Anderson? Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the concerns I brought forward was being able to get out of one if the doors were shut from the outside. I'm just wondering if, I remember the earlier report did talk about egress, but I don't see it in the actual bylaw. Am I missing it somewhere else?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I don't believe you're missing it. I took my list to come back to council from our last meeting, and so this one wasn't on the list. I do remember us speaking about it at the meeting. I don't have an answer for you. I think that due to the nature of these types of buildings, there's one way in and one way out. So that is sort of in that nature. So we haven't, as part of this program, talked about requirement for a second exit.
Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I'm not talking about a second exit. I'm talking the fact that these are locked with big iron swing gate kind of locking mechanisms that totally seal them. And I don't think that allows for somebody inside, should that swing gate become closed, to be able to exit. So that's what I'm talking about. Is there a way of requiring them to be, so that people don't get trapped in them? If do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do understand what you're saying, Councillor Henderson. I'm just not sure how to answer the question. So yeah, I'm not sure how to answer. I understand the concern, but I'm not sure how to address it. I guess as you said, they're sort of purpose built for what they are. So I haven't seen anything in the research that I've done about an internal way to open those types of doors, and that's why I mentioned the second egress possibility. If there was a so-called man door added to these, then that would provide that egress in case the main doors were to become locked. But I am not aware of a system. I'm not saying it's not out there. I just haven't done research that far to understand whether such a system exists. And the analogy would be the trunk safety that are in vehicles.
Okay, I just want to make sure that was considered before we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. We have Councillor Chalmers.
Yeah, just to respond to Councillor Anderson, it's my understanding with shipping containers that it's a pretty big effort to actually close them. So for somebody to get locked in, I think it'd be a very deliberate thing, and they're small enough that you'd be able to know. So I don't know how much that would fall under sort of our purview, in my opinion, but I appreciate what you were saying. And then in regards to Councillor Thick, I appreciate and agree about not wanting them to use for short-term rentals, but I think it's quite clear when something's designed for something that it's not designed for something else, that, if we start listing all the things that can't be, it could get really bogged down. So I'm comfortable with these as it is being specifically for storage. And then it becoming a bylaw issue or something if people are breaking that law. So I'm supportive of it at that point.
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. And I'm actually going to speak, Councillor Thick, and then I have toured Tofino and looked at the shipping containers that are being used both up in industrial way as well as on residential properties. And I have a couple comments. Actually, I agree with Councillor Chalmers on several points. That just to note that it's very difficult. You cannot close these shipping containers by accident. They have to be a very large bar lifted, closed, and then dropped down. So if somebody were to be locked inside one, it would be because somebody put them in there. That's my experience. I also agree with Councillor Chalmers that I think that I have not seen any of the shipping containers, and there's numerous shipping containers out there being used right now, and none of them that I've seen are habitable or would be habitable unless they were significantly changed within the building code, and that isn't really covered under this particular bylaw. This is for storage. So I'm happy to leave it stand as it is. And I do have a comment about landscape screening, and thank you very much, Councillor Challenger, for bringing that up, because I was a little unsure as well. And it would be, I think it would be actually difficult to require shipping containers on industrial lands or private lands that are already heavily screened by vegetation and forest that neighbors can't see a shipping container. I think it would be a little onerous to require landscape screening in those instances. I think the shipping containers on Industrial Way are by no means any different than any of the other industrial looking objects up there. So that's my one comment on not imposing something on people with already shipping containers up there that I don't think really it's necessary, except in some residential areas where they would be seen by neighbors and perhaps be an eyesore. That's what I have for comments. So I am actually fairly happy to support this with those comments, unless Mr. Rogers has any more comments for this. And I'll let Mr. Rogers speak to my comments, and then Councillor Thick, you can have your time as well.
Thank you, Mayor Law. I don't think I have anything to add. I think that if council was moving towards adoption, or not adoption, excuse me, second reading as amended today, that we could adjust the height issue in the bylaw, and maybe I'd look to Ms. Best and Mr. McPherson to confirm that we could do that. And I also have, if anybody's interested, a definition for landscape screening from zoning bylaw. So if you want to hear what it actually is in our bylaw, I'm happy to read that out. So I'll just leave that there, and if anybody wants, I can quote that.
Sure, I'd love to hear that. That'd be great.
Great. Landscape screening means natural vegetation retained or the planting of predominantly coniferous or deciduous shrubs and trees in such a manner as to visually seclude an area from its surroundings.
And just to clarify, would that be required of shipping containers on Industrial Way?
At this point, yes.
Councillor Challenger, you know what? I'm gonna let you speak, but Councillor Thick had her hand up first, so we're just gonna let her, and then I'll get right to you.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify the point. The reason that I brought that up about the accommodation is that I remember the time when we allowed shipping containers in the lot on Campbell Street, and maybe Mr. Rogers can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand actually was put there was look-alike shipping containers. So further to Councillor McMaster's point, I think it is important that the height and the size is actually delineated, because those shipping containers were not real shipping containers. They were look-alike ones that then rented out for $1,500 a month and more. So I'm just saying the reason I said what I said is because I think we got ourselves maybe into a bit of trouble with a previous decision that involved shipping containers, and maybe others don't see it as a problem now, but it worked out well. But I think size and scope and screening are really important. So thank you.
Councillor Challenger.
Thanks. In reference to a couple of comments that have been made, I have a question about I don't know if this is common practice in the writing of bylaws, but one, in just what Councillor Thick was speaking to, could there be the definition of storage be very clearly indicated within the bylaw, and perhaps say can absolutely not be used for this and or anything else? And then second, could there be, for the purpose of the landscape screening, would it be possible to have, depending on the type of zoning that they were in, so for instance, zoning in industrial way would have perhaps different requirements than in a residential zoning? That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Challenger. And maybe I'll just back up and just address Councillor Thick's earlier comments as well. The containers or the buildings that are located on Campbell Street have building permits and occupancies, and so they're a form of a building. So Councillor Thick, you're correct in stating that their buildings may look like shipping containers, but they went through the building permit process, and that's the form that they have. So those are legal for what they're intended for, and there was no mistakes made or any of that. They were applied for as buildings and they were given permits and occupancy. In terms of the zoning, the way to make storage the only use is to write storage as the only permitted use in the bylaw, which is what we've done. There is no definition currently in the zoning bylaw for storage specifically, because it's one of those words that we tend to refer back to the dictionary for. So in planning, when something is not defined in the bylaw, it goes back to basically the language. So back to the dictionary, and that's how we get our definitions. It doesn't mean that we couldn't add storage as a definition here, and I'm happy to look at that if that's what council would wish. And then finally, Councillor Challenger, we can definitely change this per zone in terms of landscape screening and others. I think what I'm hearing though today is that I'm hearing a number of different concerns about the bylaw amendment in front of council today, and I think that maybe in our attempt to move this through fairly quickly to try to regulate something that is unregulated now, that we may have missed some critical points and may have not got our details completely correct to Council McMaster's points about stacking and height. So I'm happy to take this back with the notes that I have so far and any other notes that come from this meeting to try again. And that would probably come back to council sometime near the new year. But I think I'm hearing enough concerns here as your manager of community sustainability to suggest that I don't know that it would make much sense to go forward now. So I just wanted to put that out there, so that if that's council's wishes, I'd be happy to take that on and get back to you at a point sometime in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Thank you for that. Okay, well, I think we can probably take Mr. Rogers' direction in that, and with the notes he's made and concerns, and refer it back and come back closer to the new year. And Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just on the whole idea of landscape screening. In some cases, I think we have some containers that have been added cladding to them to make them more presentable. And in some cases, I think they've just been painted. So there might be options. And then the last comment on that is that in some areas, I think these structures already may fall under development permit guidelines that take care of some of the issues around the appearance and the aesthetics of it. So I'm not sure if that's correct, but I know that the design review panel has considered in some cases, shipping containers. So to add to the notes.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Do we need a motion to defer then?
Yeah, that's just what I was going to ask to refer back to staff for further review based on the notes provided. seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any further comments? Do we need to actually say the motion, or is that good enough? So perhaps you want to go ahead, Councillor Thick, with the actual motion.
Motion to defer the recommendation under 8.2. Do you want me to read it out? Just a motion to defer the recommendation under 8.2 is enough?
I think with the recommendation to staff to come back with I don't know what you'd say.
With the points raised at the May 25th meeting?
Sounds good to me. Is that good for you, Councillor McMaster, for seconding? Excellent. Any further comments? All in favor? Okay, none opposed, motion's carried. Moving on, 8.3, we have a development variance permit to Tranfield 603 Pfeiffer Crescent. And we have a report from Community Sustainability. Go ahead, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to close this one and open the other PowerPoint. Great. I think councils can see the bear again. For my second presentation, we'll be discussing a development variance permit for Tranfield at 603 Pfeiffer Crescent. Just a little bit of background on this one. This application revolves around the development of a single-family house with a secondary suite. The request is to move from 2 stories to 3 stories. In essence, that would mean turning the basement into a story. The lot in question is here outlined in bold red. To the left, you can see the access to Bars Mountain, and then to the top of the photo, to the north, you can see Pfeiffer Crescent and the neighborhood surrounding it. This is one of the last undeveloped lots on the street. I believe there's 2 more lots at the top of the street, or 2 or 3 lots at the top of the street that have yet to be developed. The applicant is proposing to build a walkout basement with a 2-bedroom suite and garage, similar to some other units along that road. The main house, which would sit above the basement, would be 2 stories and 3 bedrooms. Again, not unfamiliar for this location. The location on Pfeiffer, I'm sure everybody is aware, is somewhat challenging, and since it's a fairly steep slope on most of the lots that come down to a cross slope that's also quite steep, the road itself. The applicant is not proposing to raise the overall height of the building, so the applicant is proposing to build a 30-foot high building. Currently, the maximum height in that zone is 34 feet, and it would match the existing neighborhood form. In terms of community feedback, we received 2 comments. We received one from a neighbor who's in support, and then we had one person who had questions about accessing the lot, and we provided some information to the person who emailed regarding what the driveway will look like, where the access will come from. So the applicant will be required to come in off of a Pfeiffer rather than Bars Mountain, but that feedback mostly had to do with more building permit questions rather than the variance itself. So in conclusion, the variance will not disrupt the general form and character of the area. The variance may reduce the need for overall lot grading and site prep. The variance will not result in any exterior change to the appearance of the building and is designed to allow the lowest level to be made into a habitable space. And the variance is not anticipated to negatively impact neighboring properties. Based on that, staff are recommending that the variance be approved by council. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Okay, this is seems like a fairly straightforward variance. Questions, Councillor Steer?
I was just going to move the recommendation, if that's okay.
I would be happy with that.
Sure. I'll move that the council approve development variance permit number 06-21 to vary District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770/1997 for lot 10, district lot 115, Clackwood District Plan, BIP 59031 as follows. Vary part 8.6 of the District of Tofino zoning bylaw number 770/1997 to increase the maximum permitted stories for a principal dwelling in an R1 zone from 2 to 3 as shown on the proposed design attached as Exhibit A to DBP 06-21.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Do we have any comments on this? Councillor Thick.
Yeah, just quickly, I would like to just say, that I really appreciate the work that the proponent put into this application. And I think this is the kind of work that we appreciate seeing as council. It makes it much more easy for us to, wrap our minds around it. And I hope that this is the kind of, just the work that's gone into this. I hope that this is what we're going to see in the future. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? All in favor of the motion? None opposed, motion's carried. Thank you. We're moving on to 8.4. No, it is, okay, 5:45. We have meeting procedure amendments, report from corporate services.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't have a presentation this evening. I'm just here for information. This is specifically a follow through with the last council meeting where you presented the council meeting procedure amendment bylaw details. And this is just the presentation of the specific bylaw with all of the elements that were approved and forwarded to staff to develop and draft.
Thank you for your work on this, Ms. Best. Do we have any comments from council? Seeing none, would we like to have somebody make this motion? Councilor Challenger. She put her hand up. Go ahead, Councilor Challenger.
Okay, I'll move the recommendation that District of Tofino Meeting Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 1229.02 2021 attached as Appendix 2 to the report titled Meeting Procedure Amendments dated May 25th, 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time, and that staff be authorized to provide notice to the public in accordance with Section 94 and 124 in brackets 3 of the Community Charter.
Excellent. Councillor, so we actually had Councillor Chalmers beat you to it there, Councillor Anderson, once again, quicker on the draw. Any further comments for this? All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. Thank you very much, Ms. Best, for your work on this. I look forward to some of those streamlining efforts. 8.5, Events, Arts, Culture, and Heritage, or each committee. If there's no objection, recommend that the minutes of the Events, Arts, Culture, and Heritage Committee meeting held May 13th, 2021 be received as delivered, and seeing no objection, that is carried. And we can carry on now for the next one. Who would like to make the next motion?
I'll do this one. I'll move that the Events, Art, Culture, and Heritage Advisory Committee recommend the following recipients for the 2021 Arts, Culture, and Heritage Grant Program be awarded as follows. Clackwood Action, 2,500. Friends of Clackwood Sound, 2,500. Tofino Arts Council, 2,500. Tofino Jazz Festival, 2,500. Tofino Market, 2,000. West Coast Winter Music Series, 2,500. Wickaninnish Community School, $532.
We have a seconder. Councillor Chalmers. Okay, any comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.
I'll carry on, I guess. I'll move the recommendation that the Events, Arts, Culture, and Heritage Advisory Committee recommend the following recipients for the 2021 Event Support Grant Program be awarded as follows. Friends of Clayoquot Sound, $2,500. Tofino Arts Council, $2,500. Tofino Community Food Initiative, $2,500. Tofino Jazz Festival, $2,500. Tofino Market, $2,500. A Chef for the Future, $0.
They have a seconder. Councillor Chalmers, comments? All in favor? None opposed, motion's carried. One more recommendation.
Two more, actually.
Oh, two more, look at that.
I'll move that a second call be put out for the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Grant Program in 2021.
Seconded by Councillor Challenger.
A quick comment on this. This recommendation is put forward because the program was undersubscribed to.
Thanks for that comment, Councillor Anderson. And any further comments? All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion's carried. The last recommendation.
And I'll move that the remaining unallocated funds in the 2021 Event Support Grant Program be deferred and used in the Event Support Grant Program for 2022.
Seconder? Councillor Challenger, any further comments?
And just a quick comment again, committee considered this the right action to take in that this is funded through the RMI program and these funds can be deferred to be used, and sort of anticipated the possibility of there being more events applied for funding next year in a hopefully post-COVID situation.
Excellent. Thank you for that comment explanation. Very good. Any further comments? All in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion's carried. Great. It's always great to give away some money to such good causes. I don't think we have anything under bylaws. And then we have business initiated by council members. We have 10.1 committee and external appointment verbal reports from councillor members, standing items. Do we have any? Seeing none. Moving along, 10.2, notice of motion from Councillor Thick regarding the council remuneration bylaw. And I will turn this over to Councillor Thick.
Yeah, I brought this forward because I thought it was important since we just had a by-election, and it happens that the by-election took place after 2 years had gone forward in the 4-year term of 2018 to 2022. So those of us that have been elected, don't have perhaps the right up-to-date equipment to do what we are required to do. And so I put forward that the sentence in regard to after the first 2 years of any 4-year term, the reimbursement shall be provided on a prorated basis. So I think that basically, it was nobody's fault. It happened that our mayor, and well done to her, moved on to provincial politics. And as happened in 2018, a member of council sadly died. So I think when these things happen, it's just the way they go. And I think that, we use our cars, we use our home offices, we use our phones. And I feel that the computer is one thing that we really need as a major tool in our job. And, hearing what had recently happened in a nearby municipality in terms of compromised action on other council computers, I think it's a wise thing to consider that we have some sort of a separate device for security as well for our work as councillors. So that's why I brought this forward, and I think it pertains to several of us at this point in time. So I think that it would be, in fact, I think that I think the rate at $7.50 is quite low, but I'm willing to consider just removing that sentence in order to, I guess, get the right piece of equipment for the job that we're required to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thick, for bringing this forward. And Councillor Chalmers, you have a comment.
Hi, I fully agree with Councillor Thick. I think, especially in this day and age, this pandemic has showed how important it is to have the tools needed, and to make it accessible for different varieties of people to run for council. And on the wage that is paid, it's not sustainable to be able to spend so much of it on equipment that is needed to do the job. I've been really fortunate with my jobs to be able to have a second work laptop that I'm able to have my agenda packages on and my notes. But working from home, it would have been pretty difficult otherwise. And so for the new councillors, new mayor, anybody else coming in, making it more accessible to anybody, I think it's important for us to be able to do our jobs and support that. So I appreciate that Councillor Thick has brought this forward, as well as I agree that $7.50 isn't enough. You can't buy a computer these days for that amount. So be interested to see what everybody else has to say on that. But I think something along the lines of 1,000 across the board, it makes more sense.
Thank you, Councillor Chalmers. Councillor Anderson, you're next.
I'm just wondering why the suggestion is to eliminate the upon proof of purchase part of that. I think that's important. Otherwise, you could just say you bought a computer and you don't have to provide any proof of it.
Yeah, sorry, that's probably a complete oversight. I was just trying to take something out as opposed to making it more complicated, but it can certainly be put back in there. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Anderson. Do you have a follow-up question on that, Councillor?
Yeah, instead of sort of working sort of with all the details of this, maybe the motion council supports the notion of this, which should just be referred to staff, and maybe they could look into the costs and then some of those kind of details, what it actually means to remove some of those things. And then it could come back to us rather than trying to fully write the policy right now.
I do believe staff have actually worked on this, but maybe
Sure.
Mr. McPherson, we could.
Yeah, we've had a look at this, and we can do whatever council would like here. Just as a bit of a reminder, the $7.50 is embedded in the remuneration bylaw that was a committee was struck at the end of the last council term, reviewed remuneration, made some adjustments to it, and actually computer purchase was one of the things that was considered. So I wonder if the amount is something that could wait for a year until we strike another committee to look at council's overall compensation. But certainly with respect to I think the core issue that Councillor Thick has identified, that councillors do take office midway through term. So rather than prorating, we can bring something to council, an adjustment to the bylaw to allow new council members coming in halfway through or 2/3 of the way through a 4-year term, the opportunity to get the right equipment purchased.
Councillor Anderson, follow up.
Yeah, just the other, I don't know if there are cheaper models available, but if you did spend less than $7.50, would you still qualify for the $7.50 if you didn't have proof of purchase?
I think that's covered with the up to $7.50, and the amount was intended to capture like a read-only type device, so that councillors could, read their agendas. I appreciate the comments that are being made that there have been unanticipated changes to the way we conduct business, and some of those may continue into the future. If things go well, we may be back to in-person meetings where what we're hoping, the intent for council is to have devices where they can read their agendas and participate in meetings. What we used to do back in the olden days is give you all paper agendas and no device. So this is a move that actually replaces paper rather than is meant to provide full computing functionality and the ability to mine Bitcoin or whatever people do with their computers today.
Yeah, I think that just to point out that we've been going through a pandemic for quite a while now, and these computers have been essential, very essential services, and the technology like Zoom or Teams or all the other ones require a fairly highly sophisticated system, and it is essential for our work. I actually think I'm thinking about the 750 being given to a committee, noting the importance of computers and how they've been used. I actually have a little bit of discomfort with that. I think this is a tool that we all need. It's essential, and it should have a real number attached to it that represents, the actual tool that we need. So I agree with that, and I agree that this number is too low. So that's my concern about giving the number to a committee for a tool, personally. But noting that, what is council's flavor? Are we happy to refer this on? Should we vote on this particular motion before us? How would we like to go about this? Councillor Steer?
I think the suggestion to refer it back to staff to clean it up and present it back to council, and I hear what Mr. McPherson is saying about at the close of the 2018 term of the previous council, where they struck the committee to go over remuneration. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McPherson, that amount for the 750 is embedded in that remuneration bylaw. So we would have to re-examine that remuneration bylaw and make changes to that to adjust the amount at this time. As well as this notice of motion.
So the amount and the circumstance under which the amount is earned are both embedded in the remuneration bylaw. And so what the notice of motion that's coming from Councillor Thick is requesting is that the manner in which that amount is, I'll say, earned, be adjusted so that it's not prorated if someone buys a computer later in the term. So that's, I think, a fairly straightforward question. Council has asked this evening if it's possible to adjust that 750 amount, and it certainly is, and we can do that at the same time. My suggestion would be to wait to the larger review of that bylaw, but I'm hearing other comments from the mayor and maybe another councillor. So certainly whatever council is looking for us to, we're not trying to, have you try and do the job with incorrect tools. If you'd like staff to research an amount that might work better for something, obviously with a camera in it and so on, that wasn't anticipated, certainly in 2018, we can do that research for you and bring something a little bit more comprehensive back to council.
Thank you, Mr. Fiction. I do have a follow-up question if anybody else has a question. If we did, Mr. McPherson, if we did make this motion as is and adopt it as is, would this come into effect? When would this come into effect, and would it be applicable to this council?
It would be applicable to this council, yes. So if this motion were to be adopted as is, I think with the, we don't like the term, but friendly amendment from Councillor Anderson suggesting that a receipt be provided, then we can, we bring it back to council. It would have to come to 2 meetings, as you know how adoption of bylaws works. So once adopted, it would be applicable to this council.
Okay, then perhaps my suggestion would be for this is a suggestion for council to consider, is that we recommend this motion with the amendment, and then we direct staff to move further to review the remuneration bylaw for the upcoming 2022 election. Does that make sense? Go ahead, Ms. McPherson.
Yeah, just the second part of the resolution is not required. That's something that's already came from council 3 years ago. That we will automatically at this time next year be pulling a committee together, like a citizen advisory committee, to look at how council is compensated compared to other municipalities, as well as look at other factors like like the ones we're talking about this evening.
Oh, that was my. I should have been more clear. I meant to say if we pass this motion now, then it would be applicable to this council, and then we can move on, as you say, further with further review later on. But my point being that I'd like something to be applicable to this council right now. So that's my point. And with amendments, and we've had 2 suggested amendments. One is with the upon proof of receipt, and the other is, and this one is a little bit more sticky perhaps, because I've heard that it's part of the remuneration bylaw, but it's also amendable, and that is the amount. So Councillor Chalmers?
I'd like for us to wait on the amount and stick with just the one amendment if possible.
So just to be clear, to make the motion, a reimbursement of up to $750 will be given to each council member upon proof of purchase of a computer at the beginning of their term on council. Yes? Is everybody okay with that one? Okay. Okay, then I'm going to make the motion with the amendment. Or Councillor Chalmers, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just seconding it.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had the amendment quite, because I think I missed a word in there. But Ms. Best, was that good enough for a motion?
Yes, I have the second part of the motion to read with a reimbursement of up to $750 will be given to each council member upon the proof of purchase with receipts. And so on.
Excellent. Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Any further comments? Oh, one, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
Being a bit of a stickler here, but is it clear enough what beginning of the term is? Is that 1 month? Is it 6 months? Is it the first year?
Through the.
So Your Worship, I think we're clear what it means. It's not the beginning of that term, it's the beginning of their term. So I think it seems to refer specifically to I'm interpreting that as referring to when a particular councillor takes office.
And there'll be, of course, yeah. So there'll probably be some leeway for timing there to get a device. Is everybody happy with that? Any further comments?
Through the chair, if I may, if we can just add into the beginning of the resolution that council direct staff to bring forth amendments to the District of Tofino Council Remuneration Bylaw, and then we can move through the formalized bylaw adoption process rather than adopting it through a single motion here, because we do need to do the 3 readings and adoption. So, and then I'd like to actually provide you with a drafted bylaw at the next council meeting, if that works.
Is that okay with people? Are people all right with that one? Councillors? Makes sense? That makes sense. Thank you, Ms. Best. Okay, with that further addition to our amended recommendation, all in favor? Seeing none opposed, motion's carried. It is after 6 o'clock. Before we oh, sorry, we have unfinished business. Perhaps we'll do that first. Any unfinished business? And we have question period. Do we have anybody signed up for questions?
Through the chair, there's no one signed up for the question period, but I will call once, and I will call twice, and I will call thrice, and there are still no requests for comments and questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Best. And I was actually going to see if anybody wanted to call a 2-minute recess. Looking to council. Yes, Councillor McMaster. Yes, okay, that is a good. Well, then we'll call a 2-minute recess before we move into closed.
Can we just make it 5? Come back at 6:15?
5, of course, because it's 5 anyway. Councillor McPherson,
Okay.
McPherson.
If I could, maybe we could just get the motion to go into closed, and then we can clear the room, and then when we come back, we'll be in a closed meeting.
Okay, somebody move, we move into closed session.
I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91C of the community charter to discuss matters relating to employee relations.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any comments? All in favor? Motion is carried. None opposed. Motion is carried. Okay, we'll move into closed session, and then we move to seeing no opposition to moving for a 5-minute recess. I will move a 5-minute recess.